the show. You heard me already tell you, hi, YouTube. How's everybody doing? Hope everybody's okay. So the first part of the show, I spent giving the Urban View family a bit of a rundown as to the stories we're going to cover today. We have many, many stories to get to today. But unlike what we usually do, YouTube, where I come on here and I give you all kind of the snapshot version of the stories, and then I go back offline and then I sort of just talk with Urban View about the stories that I gave y'all a snapshot of. Sometimes when we're doing that, I get to the full coverage and sometimes I don't, but usually we save YouTube for the news. However, we're doing something a little different today, slightly different. I have written a skit, a play, if you will. It's really a skit. And this is a skit that explores the realities that we are now in. And it focuses on, it's sort of like a, I don't know, when British TV, when they have on this Discovery Channel, today we are exploring the life of the salamander. And it's like this whole approach to documentary style footage or documentary style exposés where you're looking at different parts of nature. And I used to love, I still do love nature shows, documentaries about, what's happening in the ocean, what's happening in the forest, in the jungles of Africa. Are jungles actually in Africa? I think jungles are in South America. Anyway, point being, I wrote a skit in that spirit. Because I think what's happening right now is pretty redonkulous, because we are in a moment where people who have for the past 60 years have seen the country become more and more diverse and integrated, not at all perfectly whatsoever, but more and more diverse and integrated, are having whole ass conniptions right now. They can't take it. They can't take it. And they're very fragile in such a way that I'm like, but y'all supposed to be the master race. I think y'all was the master race. So as I was thinking about this, because I like to employ not just the news and not just, the facts and the hard talking, I like to employ art and artistic moments. I am not an artiste. I'm just somebody who appreciates a good art thing, this exposure, whatever, play, movie, music. I love museums. That's just how I roll, right? So I wrote a skit, and this skit is called The Fragilewhytes. Now, there are a couple of different characters in this skit. One, all right, I gotta have to stop myself from laughing. All right, the first character that you're going to meet once the skit starts is Miss Millie Cruella de Ville. Now, Miss Millie Cruella de Ville is, you might remember her cousin, Miss Millie, the mayor's wife, who appeared in The Color Purple. Miss Millie Cruella de Ville is a part of a news network, if you will, the Discovering Truth channel, and she is going to introduce to us the topic for today's segment, which is the Fragilewhyte. Now, the Fragilewhyte is a creature. We're not going to actually hear from the Fragilewhyte, but the Fragilewhyte is the creature that is being studied by the expose team, the documentary team, which is led by Miss Millie Cruella de Ville. Now, the other character in this skit is Mr. Colin. Actually, Mr. Colin's full name is Mr. Colin Iser. Colin Iser is somebody who is out working in the field. He is the reporter for Miss Millie Cruella de Ville's reporting team. And so Mr. Colin Iser is going to expose to us the dangers of what the current very delicate ecosystem in which the Fragilewhyte lives is under, because the Fragilewhytes are under attack. All right, I'm enjoying this already too much. And yes, this was Fragilewhytes. It was inspired by the show Fraggle Rock, which I used to watch a whole lot as a kid. So Lurie has written a skit. Let's see if it goes well. Okay, it may not. I don't know how this is gonna go, but we're gonna try it and we're gonna figure it out together. Because frankly, I can't do another day of just news. We gotta find joy, and sometimes you gotta build joy wherever you can. All right, are we ready? Okay, I'm excited. All right, the Discovering Truth channel presents The Fragilewhyte. In this episode of the Discovering Truth show, I'd like to introduce all of you to a well-known but rarely studied creature, and that creature's name is the Fragilewhyte. I am your host, Miss Millie Cruella de Ville. Perhaps you've met my cousin, Miss Millie, the mayor's wife. Anyway, I will be your narrator on this episode of Discovering Truth. And again, today's subject is the Fragilewhyte. And bringing us in person inside from the field is our reporter on the scene, Mr. Colin Iser. Mr. Iser, please tell us what you have learned in your studies of the Fragilewhytes. Yes, Miss Millie Cruella de Ville, I am Colin Iser, here to report on what we've learned in our observations. Now, in its own environment, the Fragilewhyte is the master of all its surveys. In fact, members of the Fragilewhyte community leadership declare that they are indeed the master race. Now, the Fragile Whites have a very dominant personality. Its defense mechanism is actually quite simple. It creates structures to ensure that, frankly, it never has to confront nor interact with anyone that it perceives to be a threat. Essentially, Miss Millie Cruella de Vil, the Fragile White employs the ultimate defense mechanism. It creates habitats where only it can have power because they have imposed rules that suggest that only Fragile Whites are allowed to compete against other Fragile Whites. I'm sorry, Mr. Colonizer. Miss Millie Cruella de Vil here. Does declaring themselves members of the master race have anything to do with their understanding of their power? Well, Miss Millie, it would appear that they believe that simply by repeating the phrase, "we are the master race," repeatedly, that the Fragile Whites have achieved the previously unthinkable. Instead of camouflaging themselves so that they are not seen by other potential predators the way that other creatures on the planet do, the Fragile Whites instead camouflage themselves against the reality in their own minds. Well, clutching my alabaster white pearls. Well, then, wouldn't that explain, Mr. Colonizer, wouldn't that explain why the Fragile Whites seek to only occupy environments that they can control? Am I to understand? Someone passed me the vapors. I feel like I may swoon. Am I to understand that it is there in those self-contained communities which exclude reality that the Fragile Whites are the happiest, Mr. Colonizer? Why, exactly right, Miss Millie Cruella de Vil. This protective system has allowed the Fragile Whites to establish what many social scientists believe was a rock-solid defense mechanism. It essentially protected Fragile Whites from the types of competition that occur throughout the natural world. I'm sorry, Mr. Colonizer, I don't understand. If the Fragile Whites' only power is that they have convinced themselves that they have all the power, and they affirm that belief by never competing with someone who might be more powerful, I just don't understand how this works in the real world. Oh, Miss Millie, your little female brain probably could not understand all of the machinations of the Fragile Whites, as of course they are the master race. But due to the effectiveness of their belief system, a system that, again, largely relies on avoiding actual competition and on convincing other occupants of Fragile Whitelandia that they were all powerful. I'm sorry, Mr. Colonizer, are you to tell me, am I to believe, with my fragile female brain, that the Fragile Whites don't just convince themselves that they are all powerful, but that the root of their power is in convincing the other creatures in Fragile Whitelandia that is also the case? Well, Miss Millie Cruella de Vil, yes, that is exactly it. Until recently, however. Unfortunately for the Fragile Whites, recent discoveries by ethical social scientists have led us to understand that the secret to Fragile White power is the following. They can only be powerful where they only compete against each other. And while typically they see that as a power source, once the rest of the occupants of Fragile Whitelandia realize that there is a jig, then Miss Millie Cruella de Vil, the jig is up. According to new evidence, as soon as the Fragile Whites are no longer able to rig the game, as it were, by only competing against others in their natural environment, apparently they lose all of their power whatsoever. My word. Is the reason that Fragile Whites cannot bear to learn anything of any information about other people? Is it related to this? I have been told that the Fragile Whites absolutely refuse to take in any information that might tell them anything about other people who might also have accomplished wonderful things. Is that part of their weakness? Why, yes, Miss Millie Cruella de Vil, part of their defense mechanism not only requires them to pretend, as it were, that they were the only people who ever had an intelligent thought, but it also contains a very, very powerful point of weakness. Because, Miss Millie Cruella de Vil, one thing that I, Mr. Colonizer, from the long line of colonizers have learned is that as soon as the rest of the world realizes how foolish the Fragile White system is, it ceases to have all power whatsoever. Oh, my word. I suppose that does make some sense, Mr. Colonizer, because if you must pretend that you are the most powerful in the world by ignoring the power of other people, I suppose that can only work for just a short period of time. Why, yes, Miss Millie Cruella de Vil, what we are seeing now is the end of the authority of the Fragile White. What we are seeing, Miss Millie Cruella de Ville, is that the rest of the world appears to be clear that the Fragile White is, quite frankly, despite protesting that they are in fact the master race, they are, it appears, one of the weakest, limpest, most flaccidly impotent members of all of humanity, because they are the one group of people who don't know how to live with other people. They cannot coexist. And that ends up being the way in which the Fragilewhytes have brought about their own wretched destruction. Well, Mr. Colonizer, I'm so grateful that we have men with your big colonizer brain who are able to explain all of this to the rest of us. I just certainly do hope that the Fragilewhytes are able to figure out how to reacclimate themselves to a reality where the rest of us live, because unfortunately, if they do not, it appears they may be facing extinction. Ah, yes, Miss Millie Cruella de Ville, what you have identified is something that has worried the social scientists ever since we have realized this great vulnerability. How then can this group of folk ever suppose that they will be a part of what the rest of us experience in the world? I do not know. The social scientists do not know, but it is causing great levels of panic all throughout Fragile Whitelandia. And hopefully in our next episode, we will be able to explore exactly what that fallout looks like. I am your reporter in the field, Mr. Colonizer, here to report on what appears to be the demise of the Fragile White community. And I, Miss Millie Cruella de Ville, am here to let you all know that Mr. Colonizer is doing the very difficult work of studying all of the entities of the universe who simply are a misfit. They are abnormalities, if you will, because again, one cannot expect that one could be the only group of beings or people or entities on a planet who essentially are the master race when you're only the masters in your own damn mind. That's it. I'm sorry. I should probably be more serious. We're facing some really difficult times right now. I should be way more serious about this, but I can't. I can't. Yesterday in the podcast, and Lurie breaks it down, which I'm trying to figure out which way my hair is going. The camera's reversed, so I'm trying to fix my hair and I'm looking at the wrong thing. I said in the podcast yesterday that came out, Lurie breaks it down. I talked about the fact that Donald Trump has signed this executive order that now says that not only is it okay to no longer adhere to the previous rules, which said you couldn't have segregation, because remember, segregation, separate but equal, is unconstitutional. And that has been the case ever since Lyndon B. Johnson in 1965 signed that executive order that basically said if you're going to be a corporate entity that contracted with the government, you couldn't be racist. Right. And this was because the year previously, in 1964, Lyndon B. Johnson had signed the Civil Rights Act, which basically said, I mean, you could be racist, but you can't be racist in the provision of public services. So if you own a store and you racist as hell, you could be the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan, but you can't take that shit into the store. You can't block Black people from coming into the store simply because they're Black. That is now a violation of the law, the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So last month, Black History Month, y'all's president, elongated Muskrat. Oh, damn it. I'm sorry. The co-president, the junior president, the boy toy president, Trump, that one. He signs this executive order that rescinds Lyndon B. Johnson's executive order, basically telling corporations that they no longer had to commit to not being segregationists and racist in the provision of services if they were going to contract with the federal government. Then the Donald Trump administration took the additional step of sending a notification to all the agencies and to corporate partners that basically said, oh, and by the way, this also means that the ban against segregated workspaces at your corporation is also removed. And so you might have been forgiven if you believe that the Donald Trump administration had mistakenly issued an executive order or rescinded an executive order they didn't really mean to rescind. You might be forgiven for believing that was a mistake. But when they took the extra step of sending a letter and a notification that said, by the way, did you realize that when we rescinded Lyndon B. Johnson's executive order, that also meant that you could now have segregated lunchrooms and bathrooms and water fountains? Did you realize that? Just want to make sure you knew it, just in case you didn't see it in the subtext. Like, they took proactive additional steps to make it clear that we're cool with the racism again. So the question I have as we get ready to go into commercial break, 866-801-8255, 866-801-TALK. The question I have is, how are you going to respond the first time you go into a store and a white person says, "We don't serve your kind here"? Or frankly, somebody else who's not black, but also not white. Because we know that anti-blackness is universal. It even shows up in black spaces. But what is the plan? How are you going to respond the first time that you run into a store and they say, "We no longer serve your kind here. Miss Miller Cruella de Ville put out the notice that we no longer have to do it"? What's going to be the reaction? And then what's it going to look like when, I don't know, an average white member of the community or some other non-black person decides to go to get some food that's actually seasoned and tastes good and wants to go to a restaurant? And then they're told, "Excuse me, sir, what we ain't going to do is be serving your kind here because your kind don't like our kind." I mean, what does that look like? What does it look like to resegregate after 60 years of integration? And I shouldn't be laughing. This is not good. This ain't good. But I just need us to look at how redonkulously ridiculous all of this is. And then make plans accordingly, because we do have to make plans accordingly. It just so happens today I could not come on here and just do a litany of the news. I needed something that was going to allow us to have a little bit of joy. But be clear, Fragile Whitelandia, it's a real thing. It exists in the mind of Fragilewhytes. And the Fragilewhytes are the portion of the white American community that essentially see a black boogeyman everywhere. And they only feel like they have power when they are at the top of the hierarchy. They don't want to compete because they're scared of competition. They're scared of losing. They have benefited from a 406-year system that essentially said, you don't have to compete with anybody ever except us. And we're going to make sure that nobody else can. That's why every time they open up the space and we start, look at Serena and Venus Williams. Althea Gibson. I mean, sports is an easy one. Sports is an easy one. But then, I mean, just whenever we are allowed into spaces that we previously were not, we dominate. We dominate. And I mean, part of it is because we're amazing, but part of it's also because we have been socialized in a system where we knew that we were never going to have opportunities, because fragile whites don't give opportunities to non-whites, whether you're fragile or righteous whites. They just don't. And so we knew coming up that we were going to have to be 3, 4, 5, 10 times better than you, because we understood what this system was. So by the time we do get to compete openly, we bring all that better with us. It's your fault. I mean, technically your ancestors, but like all of you who willingly participate in a system that artificially gives you access to benefits and privileges, this is kind of your fault, because you rigged the game so that you would only compete against people who were mediocre. And then when our excellent selves come into the room, the intimidation sets in. Oh my God, she spoke to me meanly. Oh, she used, right now they are literally deleting information about Black excellence in the military, about women, female excellence in the military. They're literally, because they're too scared to learn about other people being great. The fragile white mind, it's a real sickness. They would rather close down schools than to have anything taught in the schools that talks about what other people have done, that talks about the reality of enslavement or the reality of genocide against the indigenous. They would rather not know nothing. They're like this, la, 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 I can't hear you, la, 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 I don't hear a thing. That's the fragile white approach. The challenge is that the rest of the world is, we're over it. We're done. We're past it. We moved on. And you can continue to be in the fragile white spaces all that you want. Just know that you're going to get left there. And you can't come with us, because the rest of us is moving forward. You can't sit with us no more. We definitely don't want you cooking none of the food. That's not going to happen. We got to get ready to go to commercial break. YouTube, I appreciate y'all. I didn't know how this was going to work. 866-801-8255, 866-801-TALK. I didn't know how this was going to work. We have never done a skit on air before. Have we? No, we've never done a skit on air before. So I had a lot of fun. I don't know how this lands for y'all, but I appreciate y'all on YouTube. Please like and subscribe and hit the little bell thing so you'll get the notifications. At some point, we may have a membership situation. I just got to figure it out, make sure that I can do y'all some justice in that space. But I appreciate y'all on YouTube giving us some time. Make sure you also go to the podcast. Lurie breaks it down, because I explored this topic in a lot of depth in the last episode, and y'all are telling y'all tomorrow's conversation that's going to be on the podcast is fire. It's fire. It's fire. It's fire. So I thank y'all so much. YouTube, I appreciate you. Please like, subscribe, and and I'm trying to get to how many are we? We're at 46,000 some. I'm trying to get to 50,000 subscribers. I'm told I should say that explicitly and tell people that I need you to follow. So if you're not already following, please follow. I'm trying to get to 50,000. We're at 46 plus right now. I think we can maybe do it by the middle of next month. We'll see. I don't know, but we'll see what we can do. I appreciate y'all. Bye, YouTube. Thank you. Urban View, 866-801-8255,